All right, so let's go back to the redevelopment agency agenda, and we have a status report on the South Bayfront pedestrian bicycle bridge.
I was going to say the same thing.
Damn right. It's a 1 square mile city. What the hell? We're fools.
Clash of the Titans.
Right. I'll be right back.
Good evening, AGC members. I'm going to give a brief status report on the pedestrian bicycle, South Bayfront pedestrian bicycle bridge project. On December 6th, 2007, there was a public meeting on the project. The project was announced by mail and email, and we had over 60 people attend. And we focused on several aspects, and those were included in the agenda and in your packet. And just to summarize the major features of the project, which we asked the community to provide comment on, is the west landing ramps, and that's the slide before you now. Essentially, before you now is a figure of where the pedestrian bridge crosses the tracks and how it connects to the Bay Street garage, and where the stairs would go down, connecting to Ohlone Way. So the blue section is the ramp. The yellow line connecting to the ramp is the pedestrian route to the elevators at Bay Street. The red is the bridge crossing the tracks, and that yellow oval there is a potential are the potential locations of the stairs. There are two options for the stairs to go down into Ohlone, and one would be for the stairs to connect to the existing vehicular bridge, which you see before you, which connects both Bay Street garages. And the second option would be a stair behind that garage bridge. And this just illustrates, I will go into this further, but this shows you side by side what those options look like. The one on the left is option one, where the stairs connects to the to a replaced garage bridge. And the second option would be where the garage bridge is retained and the stairs are constructed behind it. This is more detail on the first option. Essentially, the yellow would be the stairs. That thick red line going vertically would be a new replaced garage bridge. And these are visuals of what this might look like. On the top of your screen, that's the pedestrian bridge crossing the tracks, and the stairs connecting to a replaced garage bridge and connecting to stairs going down parallel to Ohlone Way. Here's a view going down the pedestrian bridge. Going down the stairs from the pedestrian bridge. And this is the view from Shell Mound looking east toward the bridge. The second option would retain the garage bridge, and that yellow rectangle there is basically a stair tower with several switchbacks, and it would be located right just east of that garage bridge. Here's an illustration of what it might look like with the garage bridge and the pedestrian bridge coming from in front of the screen, connecting to the stairs on the left, the ramps going down and connecting to the Bay Street garage. Here's another view looking from the southeast. And this what it would look like again on Shell Mound looking east. So we presented these schemes and several other design options before the community, and the bullets before you are sort of a summarize the comments we received from the community, and they are further elaborated in the meeting summary which you have in your packet. The next steps would be to consider these comments, finalize the ramp and stair layouts, preliminary bridge concepts, which are being developed right now, and the next community meeting, which is now scheduled for March 8th, which is a Saturday. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the...
Yeah, Mayor Bukowski, I know it's early days here, but this is going to be a really unusual bridge, we would hope. And is there any possibility that we could get some input from the Public Art Committee early on in terms of public art within this structure?
Well, as a matter of fact, Ann Weber, who's on the project committee here, suggested that the Public Art Committee have significant input.
Some kind of a liaison or something, or at least be included so that we can be thinking of that element of the bridge along with the structural elements.
That has come up at the last project committee meeting. Member?
Anne offered to be that liaison, maybe informally, because she
Good.
is a member of the Public Art Committee as well. The question I raised was, to what extent do you incorporate public art? Is it something that is a piece that is somehow associated with the bridge, but is a separate art piece? To the extent that it's integrated into the design of the bridge, then you start to tread upon the domain of the architect. So one of the things that I think is very true is the expression, too many cooks spoil the broth. So I think that it's good that Anne is on the committee and she's provided valuable input. But I would be hesitant to bring in an artist to work with the architect, because that's, I think, something that the architect...
Oh, no. If she is an informal liaison, that ideas will come up and they can be batted back and forth between public art and the bridge committee. It's just that we want a recognition that this is it's going to be a very special place, and we should think about art in terms of incorporation in there. That's all I want to say. No more.
Yeah, and following up on that, if you remember, when we did this building and the admin building next door, we had that same focus, and two aspects, one of them ended up being problematical, unfortunately, but two aspects of that, apart from the public art, which is in the link and the labyrinth out in the back, were actually, through encouragement, were taken up by the architect. And one of those was the doors, the front doors over at the admin building, and the other was the signage, where an artist was actually commissioned on those two items. We ended up with some problems with the doors because they were so heavy and created openings that a child could get caught in when they were open. And so that had to be modified after it. But those are two projects in which the Public Art Committee didn't pick the artist, the developer, the architect did, and worked with them, and just towards our desire that as much art as possible be implemented into it. So I think that's all that we're really looking for here. And I think the art committee would have to, Nora, to publicly vote
Oh, right,
on making
right,
her a
right.
liaison. So.
We just want an
Yeah.
awareness there.
So that's a good thing. Now, what I'd like to understand is before we have this next community meeting, we talked last time about getting some costing on these things. Is that going to be available to us by the time of that next meeting, or is that still going to be up in the air?
Yes, they're working on the costs right now. We hope to have those by the next project committee meeting, which will precede the community meeting. So they're developing a lot of material for that next
Yeah.
March meeting.
I mean, and maybe the other council members don't feel this way. I want to have as much community input as we can have on this. It's very valuable. But I'm a little concerned about things that are being presented to the community before we hear them. So if there's going to be information that's developed as to costing on these, I'd like to, instead of having it brought back as, here's what got discussed, I'd like a presentation here so that we know where things stand beforehand. Because, we've got some intermingling problems here with this. We all want this to be a beautiful project, and I've been critical of the last bridge that we built, and it seems like we've got more constraints now than we had then in terms, and maybe not, maybe we just didn't talk about it then, with the railroad in terms of how this bridge can get constructed and get put up in a very short period of time, kind of constructed off-site and then dropped into place. And that's certainly going to impact the aesthetics of the bridge potentially. And so, I'm still in the place where I don't want to end up with, I love the stairway thing, I think it's great, but I don't want to end up with a beautiful stairway and an ugly bridge because we spent so much money on the stairway. But we have to look at the bridge part of it, not just in terms of the aesthetic of it, but what's practical, what can be done that fits the railroad's criteria, so that in fact we could actually build that bridge. And are we going to have that piece as part of the analysis before the next community meeting?
We are striving to get that data in time for the next project committee meeting, which will be before this committee meeting and before the next council meeting.
Yeah.
So at the next meeting, we hope to present as much as we can at the council meeting that we will present at the
Oh, okay.
At the
public
first meeting in February.
Because
the second meeting in
what I
February.
don't want to do is put out false expectations of people. Let's come in and have a meeting on what kind of bridge do you want to see here, when in fact, we've already found out that this is not one that the railroad's going to let us do because of their requirements. And
Right.
second of all, it's one that's so far past budget that it's not even, in the ballpark. And then also comparing the cost of the stairs versus the bridge. So that's all I want to do, is I want to make sure that stuff gets run by here before we go to the community again, whenever that meeting's going to be. And I just want to comment, although
You want me to comment on that, Dick?
Sure, thanks.
Part of what you talked about came up at our last committee meeting, and that is the idea of whether certain bridge types, the span, not anything on ramp, stairs, the span, what the cost of the structure would be. And so I think that the engineer is very cognizant of the cost and is intending to produce some rough numbers. In fact, she said that she had, at our last meeting, already done some calculations of the cost, but simply didn't present it because the calculations were too rough and didn't want to commit to those numbers. So I think that by the March 8th community meeting, there's going to be numbers associated with the cost to replace the existing vehicle bridge, and numbers associated with the types of spans. The problem is that even choosing a span, there's a range of costs associated. So on the other side, I don't think the engineer would produce a possibility that is really not possible given the railroad constraints. But the problem is that we don't know precisely what those constraints are right now. And the railroad is saying, this is not at our last community meeting, but the one before. The railroad is understandably saying, well, we would like to see a rough idea of what you're considering. And so, and I think that that's reasonable on the part of the railroad. They probably don't want to waste time providing parameters when they don't really know what is going to be constructed there. So we're all kind of moving towards narrowing the options. And I think that a good thing has been done in that we have begun to narrow the options separate from the span. We have not really narrowed that many options on the Novartis side, other than choosing the end point of the span from point A to point B. Those seem to have been established. But and on the Bay Street side, we seem to be moving towards detail on the ramps and that kind of thing. But on the Novartis side with the park, that's not yet resolved.
And we have to remember that in terms of the cost. We talk about the stairs and rebuilding the vehicle thing or not, and we talk about the span, but there's also these ramps on both sides that are going to obviously be very expensive. So all that has to be taken into consideration. Anyway, my main thing is just not to put out pie in the sky for people to choose and then find out that, sorry folks, we can't produce any of that. So to the degree that we can get this refined, I mean, I would be in favor of delaying the community meeting if we don't have enough information to take real options to the public. You know, things that are really feasible, that you know, and if we have to do some kind of a preliminary thing with the railroad and say, we're considering 5 options, you know, are you guys okay with all this, or are only 3 of those acceptable? I'd rather see us go that way and then get the public to weigh in after we've kind of done a lot of the groundwork, so.
Yeah, as far as the railroad is concerned, we've had a meeting, and there's been a very good coordination in that the railroad is not as concerned with the design of the span. They're concerned about how the construction will affect their operations, which basically we should minimize
Right.
obstruction of operations. So the bridge that is being specified should be able to be constructed in the most minimally invasive process to the railroad, and so the engineers are doing that, designing this bridge in mind, with that in mind.
And then I only have one more comment, and my last one is just, and again, as I sit right now, if it's feasible, and the stair alternative just looks tremendous to me compared to the, you know, the out front. But in terms of fair presentation, if we look at the drawing for option 1 versus the drawing for option 2, the drawing for option 2 has a car crossing the bridge, and the option 1 doesn't. We have this very esoteric, beautiful bridge with people walking and no cars. And that's kind of not a fair thing, because there's going to, in fact, if we do that, there's going to be cars crossing there. So I would either get rid of the one in option 2 or stick one in option 1, so that when people get a look at these things, they can visualize how it's really going to be.
We'll park a car there.
Yeah, well, whatever. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Any other council input? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Any public input here?
I'd just like to thank the committee for their ongoing good work.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just say about this project, I'm on the committee, although I haven't been able to make very many meetings because they're putting them during the daytime, and I work for a living, so I haven't been able to make the meetings, at least very many. I just want to say, this is like a really good thing this city's doing. How the project has morphed from the first iterations of this thing to now is pretty dramatic. First, we had what I would call a recalcitrant staff, and we had the previous public works director who was pushing a design that would not allow for bicycles, and now we have bicycles are going to be permitted on this bridge, and so I just think it's a really good thing. And I'd like to thank Councilmember Fricke for all the hard work he's done on this, and basically now it's a bicycle and pedestrian bridge, whereas before it was just a pedestrian bridge that the staff was pushing. So thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks, Councilmember Fricke. Appreciate that.
I don't remember a time when bicycles weren't going to be allowed, and the question is, could you ride them? And if you had it the way it was before, you'd get in the elevator with your bicycle, just like the current one we have. So bikes were always contemplated on it, Brian. You just, you kind of always rewrite history to fit your own needs here, and I just need to,
All right, come on, come on.
Let's stop it right there.
Let's move along.
You'll hear from me next meeting.
I'm sure we'll
oh,
hear
I'm
from
sure.
you.
We can't
I'm
wait.
sure.
You just said an untruth.
Okay, great, all right. Thank you, that's all for this. Now we have